Welcome everyone to the Mylio Photos coffee break. My name is Angela Andrew, for those of you who don't know me. If you're a first timer here, I would love for you to kind of just raise your hand and let me know. Looks like we've got a few new names here that I don't recognize, so I'm really glad that you're here. And for those of you who joined me for a while, I love having my repeats here too. And you guys are great, especially in our community, at helping out some of the other users who haven't been using Mylio as long. So it's always good to have a mix of both here. I'm joined today by Lori Rubin. She is my counterpart product evangelist. And for both of us, our goal is to help you guys understand and be able to get the most out of Mylio Photos. Today's topic is editing and enhancing your images in Mylio Photos. So while we've talked a lot in these sessions about how Mylio Photos is great at helping you get organized and getting metadata and face tagging and sending things to family search, we haven't talked a lot about editing in a while. So I wanted to do this and the next session today about editing in Mylio Photos. And the next week, we're going to start talking about editing in some third-party editors and round tripping back to Mylio. So there's a lot we can cover with photo editing, and it's one of my favorite topics. So let me go ahead and share my screen, and we'll jump into playing with some pictures because this is the most fun part, right? Go ahead and get that quit. So I pulled together a few images, different types of things that you might have in your libraries. The first ones here across the top, these are from a trip I took to a train museum a few weeks ago. So they're just, fun snapshots that we can make look better in Mylio Photos. The second two are older images that Mylio Photos actually does really, really well with historical images. So let's go ahead and play, and we're just going to start with some of these images. And as we go through, I'm going to walk you through how the editing tools in Mylio Photos works. So let's go ahead and select this first one. And if you'll notice, before I do that, actually, I'm going to go ahead and close up the info panel over here on the right. If you're looking for those edit tools, you can either open up the info panel and then choose edit here, or you can just click straight here onto the edit icon, and that's going to take you to the editing tools. Now, when you're in grid view, the only options you have are to apply presets. So if you want to go in and have a little bit more control and get to all of the editing tools, that's when you need to double click on an image, open it up in single photo view, and then you have all of these different options to work with. And if you're new to photo editing, some of these options might be a bit intimidating and you don't know what they do. So let's just kind of go down the list and get an overview of what these different tools do. So up at the top, actually, let's start with the icons here across the very top. We have our auto enhance, which is one of our presets, auto color. That's another preset. In our next release, we're also going to have an auto tone, which I'm really looking forward to. We're putting the final touches on that right now. So the next big release we have, hopefully by the end of this month, we'll have one more option up here, and it's going to be a great addition to Mylio Photos. We also have red eye removal. So if you're going through scan family photos, you have pictures taken with the flash, that on-camera flash. Before we had that red eye reduction, where we did a couple little like pre-flashes, and you just got that big old red dot in the middle of the eye. This can help you remove it. Great tool. We also have a brush. So if you want to have changes that affect only a small area of your photo, you can apply those selectively, which is very helpful. This here is your before and after. So after you make some changes, if you want to see how far you've come, you can go ahead and compare your before and after. And if you want to start over, one of the wonderful things about Mylio Photos is that all of the editing here is non-destructive, and you can revert back to your original at any time. So that's those few icons here across the top. Also, one to know about is right over here on the right, and you don't have to be in the edit tools to access this. You have your crop and rotate, which is a really important one. So let's go ahead and work through the rest of these sections here. We have at the top is our histogram. And what this does is it depicts the different color and tonal ranges in the image that you're looking at. So you can see on this image, and I'm just going to go ahead and toggle that shadow clipping on. This image is very, very dark. And all those areas that right now are showing in blue because I have this warning on have lost detail in the darkest areas. So I'm going to go ahead and turn that off. And if I go over here to the right and go ahead and click that on, you can see right here we've got a little red overlay. And that's showing over here as well some of the areas in the brightest parts of the image that I've lost detail. So you can easily toggle these on and off by clicking on these dots or clicking the J key on the keyboard. And that'll turn on both the highlight and the clipping warnings. If you ever get into your application and you're seeing these awful blue and red overlays on your pictures and you're wondering what's wrong, did everything get corrupted? No, you probably just accidentally hit that J key. So that's something to keep in mind, that that's really easy to accidentally toggle on as well, but you can easily turn it off and it doesn't harm your pictures. So this just represents on the left, the darkest parts of the image, the mid tones of the image, and over here, that's going to be the lightest parts of the image. All right, next section down. I'm going to go ahead and close that for a section. And these are our same presets that we were looking at before when we were in grid view. And you can also add your own presets. So if you go through it and you make an edit and you're like, I really like how this turned out and I have a lot of other similar pictures that this would look good for, you can actually add your own presets. So that's something fun to do as well. I don't use presets a lot personally, but please feel free to use them. You can get there. You can use those as your finished point. You can use them as a starting point for inspiration. Lots of great ways to use presets. White balance is the color of the light. So the way I like to describe this is if you have like a warm, sunny day, everything kind of has a warm kind of orange yellow glow to it. And you just feel that warmth of that yellow kind of light. In the winter, when everything's cold and cool, everything kind of has a blue cast to it. So that's your color temperature. So if we move this slider here for the temperature to the left, everything gets kind of cool and it gets very blue. And if we want to warm it up, we can move it to the right. Now with any of these sliders, when you go ahead and make a change, you can double click on it and it's going to take it back to the original default setting. So that works with any of these sliders. Tint is another aspect of that color. You can move things a little bit more green, move them a little bit more pink magenta. And those are just some ways to fine tune the colors in your image. Moving on to tone. This is your exposure, those highlights, those shadows, the bright and dark areas of your image and how they interact with each other. So in this particular image, like we said, we have a lot of dark areas here on the left. We can go ahead and go to our exposure, and this is going to brighten up every pixel in the image. And you can see it's making this very, very bright, but it did also bring out some detail here in this ceiling, which overall, I'm not thinking this is the look we want. Or we could go down here to shadows and we could purposely just impact those light or those darkest areas. So you can see that's starting to brighten up some of these areas over here. And if there's really, really dark areas, you can go down to the blacks and you can brighten up just those blacks. And you can see it's minimally affecting this area and really targeting those darkest areas of the picture. So I'm going to go ahead and double click on these, set those back to where they began, and we can go ahead and move down to color. And these settings are affecting every pixel in the image. So we have our vibrance and our saturation. So saturation is everything. We can go ahead and move this up, make everything very saturated, and we can move it down, make everything kind of faded, or move it all the way to the left and remove all of the color. Vibrance is a softer touch. It tends to target the least saturated areas of the picture. So if I move this to the right, a lot of the things we already have saturated really highly here are going to be your yellows and oranges. So it's going to bring some saturation to the rest of those pixels. So it's just a lighter touch. And typically when I want to add a pop of color, I'm going to try vibrance first. So that's a good one to know. If you want to convert something to black and white, you can simply just click on black and white, and that's going to remove all that color for you. And it changes these sliders here and lets you manipulate those tonal ranges where those colors used to be. So you can adjust those where those red areas were, and you can make the picture look a lot different and how those different tones interact with each other, which is kind of fun. So that makes it really neat. And then if you want to add back a touch of color, you can go ahead and add back in color like so. So that's up to you. I'm going to go ahead and let's just do a quick reset. And this last one here is invert. If you're working with scanned negatives, scanned film negatives, you'll notice that when they first come into Mylio, obviously they don't look quite right because they're a negative image. If you click invert, this will switch it to a positive, and then you can go ahead and work with it. Invert plus auto color does 95% of the work you need to do on a scan negative. So that's just something to keep in mind. Levels is a little bit more advanced section. When you click the auto button here, this is actually the same as auto color up here. So you can do it either way, not going to make a difference. If you click it here and then click it there, doesn't matter, doesn't change anything. And what you're looking at is the luminance here. The L is for luminance. So those are going to be your bright and dark parts of the image, your blues, your greens, and your reds. And so when you go ahead and click auto, it's going to make a subtle change to bring in those different channels just slightly to where they're more balanced in the image. So if you have an image that has color cast issues, this is a great place to start. And then you can go ahead and adjust these points to make subtle changes. And we'll talk a little bit more about that on another image because this image doesn't really have color balance issues. So I'm going to go ahead and just reset that once more. Now down here with the vignette, this is kind of a cool tool if you want to draw the eye to a specific part of an image. It allows you to darken the edges, set the subject so you can choose where that center point is and guide your viewer to the most important thing in the image. And I'll walk you through exactly how to do that in another image. It's a really helpful tool. Go ahead and scroll down here to this last section. We have our details section. If you have an image that's a bit soft, or maybe you're using an older digital camera that doesn't sharpen things very well, you can add a little bit of sharpness and detail here. I typically recommend doing this when you're zoomed in to about 100%. So let's go ahead and zoom in here. Can pull this up and you're going to start to see a little bit more of a differentiation between the edges of things. And that's what sharpening does. We also have noise reduction. So if something has a lot of that digital grain or what we call noise, you can go ahead and add noise reduction and this will soften it a bit. Now, I will say there are other tools out there that if you have a very noisy image, will handle it better, but this can help. So let's go ahead and reset this and go ahead and do a quick edit on this photo. So I really liked the perspective of this image, but I didn't really like what was going on over here. So the first thing I want to do here is crop this. So I'm going to go ahead and grab my crop tool and I'm going to go down here to where it says aspect. And right now I have it set to default for a free crop. That lets me drag my corners to any shape that I want. But for this photo, I'm going to go to a square. So let's go ahead and pull a square and then we can drag that square to where we want it. And I'm thinking maybe right about there. And I'm going to pull in a bit tighter here, right about there. And I think that's kind of a neat perspective. I was shooting this with a really wide angle lens and it just looks kind of neat. So I'm going to go ahead and go with that. And then let's try the auto enhance button. And what I've noticed with auto enhance is it tends to brighten everything up, but it also makes it feel a little bit flat. You lose some of that detail and depth. So let's bring that back. Typically we can do that with contrast. So I'm going to go ahead and bring that back and you'll see that's making some of those darker parts of the image a bit darker. And that makes it a little bit more interesting. I'm also going to add clarity, which is mid-tone contrast. It also gives the appearance of detail. And that just makes that image look a little bit more, it pops a little bit better and looks really nice. So let's take a look here at our before and our after. I think that's a better shot. And then we can even use our vignette to really focus in on, let's say, this Manchester and Central area of the image. So I have a specific kind of vignetting process that I like to do. I'll pull my amount down to -100. And I'm going to pull the size down to about the size of what I'm trying to focus in on. I can then adjust the roundness and you can go a little bit more square or you can go more oval. So let's go ahead and do that right about there. And then we can adjust the feather, which is those blend points between the light and dark areas. And I like to pull that up pretty high. Now I'm going to choose my subject. And then I'm going to click on that middle point where I want that middle to be. Right about there looks good. And then go ahead and click done right there at the bottom. And I can then go back to that amount slider and back that off. And I found that with most things, somewhere between the number 40 and 60 is going to be your sweet point. So right there at 54, I think looks pretty good. You can see it just draws us in. It takes the emphasis off of some of the other things going on in the image and just makes us look better. So there's the before and there's the after. So let's go ahead and move on to the next image. Are there any questions before we do that? Looks like we have a couple here.
Yeah, a couple in chat.
All right. Can Lightroom presets be loaded into Mylio? Unfortunately, no. So Lightroom has a lot of similar looking sliders, but the underlying algorithms that run them are very different than what's in Mylio. So there's not an exact one-to-one to bring those things over. Later on, possibly later this year, we might be introducing, it's on the roadmap. So I know it's coming. I don't know exactly when, is the ability to import and add LUTs. So those are called lookup tables and they are color grading and Lightroom presets can be exported as LUTs. And once we have the option in Mylio to bring in LUTs, then you'll have a sort of way to bring those same kind of presets in. It's a little bit of a roundabout process, but it is something we have on our roadmap. All right, can you bring up the exposure and then brush off certain areas? Yes, of course, Lori, that's what that brush up here is for. So you can go ahead, bring up the exposure and then darken down selectively. That's a great idea. Michael says, when I use Mylio and it reverts all, and to edit, it reverts all the way back to the original. Can you revert individually? You can go ahead and double click on any given slider to revert it back to its original state. So that way you don't have to revert everything. There is not a way, I don't think, let me try it, to revert a section. I think if we just double click on that, no, I think you have to do each slider individually. All right, great questions, keep them coming. And let's go ahead and go to the next image here. So this is also from the same train museum. I think I'm going to do one more train, and then we'll switch over to some historical photos because we're going to run out of time, and I could honestly talk about editing all day long. So with this one, again, we're going to crop this first. And I want to crop this into kind of a panoramic look and really emphasize the length of that trolley car and just make this look a little bit more interesting. So first things first, I'm going to go ahead and tilt this slightly. Again, I'm going to straighten this out. And I'm really looking at this light pole right here. I want that to be straight. It just needed a slight tweak. And then I'm going to stick here with my free aspect ratio. I'm going to pull this down and really bring the attention to that streetcar. So let's go ahead and pull that up. And we want to give it some room to move here. I'll pull that in maybe a little bit tighter. And I like that composition a lot more. And again, let's go ahead and start with that auto enhance. And again, it made it a little bit too flat for my taste. So let's add back in some contrast. There we go. That looks better. Add back in some of that clarity. And you'll see that's getting kind of some gritty detail, which I love here on the pavement. So that looks good. I might even add a little bit more. And you could even bump up that vibrance if you want to. Okay, from here, let's go down and add that vignette again. I'm going to pull that amount slider down to -100, and pull that size down nice and small. And here's where we're going to go ahead and get that roundness. I'm going to move that all the way up to 100, and we get a nice oval shape, which is roughly the same shape as that trolley. Now let's go ahead and take that feather, move that up, and that's going to give us a nice blend between the light and dark areas. And choose our subject. And let's go ahead and move this over. We can just keep clicking until we get it exactly where we want. That looks pretty good. Click done. And then go back down here, and then we can pull that amount back up to a point where it looks natural. So in this case, I think 49 looks pretty good. And it just very subtly draws your eye over to that trolley and lets the viewer know that that's the part of the image that's interesting. That's where I want your eye to go. So let's take a look here again at the before and the after. That's a really nice change. And we didn't have to go into any other application to make that happen, which I love. All right, let's see and take a look here at questions. Harold says, I presume the edits done in Mylio stay in Mylio and cannot be seen if the photo is opened in another app. So that's correct in general. So if you were to go into your file system and, let's say, take this image here, right click and say show in or reveal in Finder. If I take this particular raw file, you'll see it's unedited. If I wanted to work with the edits that I made in Mylio, that's totally doable. If I go up here to the export menu and let's say, or actually not the export menu, my bad. We're gonna go to the photo menu. And let's say we want to open this with Photoshop. I'm going to get the option to edit the original, which is going to take my unedited version. Or I have a chance to say, edit a copy with the Mylio Photos adjustments. And that's going to create a TIFF that has the changes that I made in Mylio baked in a high resolution file. And then I can continue editing elsewhere if I want to. And we'll talk more about that in our next coffee break. So hope that answers your question, Harold. The other thing you can do is you can always go over to export and choose to export this with the changes to like your desktop or another temporary location and then work on it. So great question. So let me go ahead and I'm going to hit the G key to go back to my grid view. And let's play with some color cast issues that you might encounter on scan photos. So this is Grizzly. My parents had him when I was little, and they had him long before I was born. Great, great dog. And you can see that this picture taken in the 70s is it has that magenta overtone. It's got some color cast issues, and this is really typical of scanned images from that era. So I want to go ahead and quickly fix this. And what I'm going to do here first is I'm just going to crop this in to get rid of that white border. And it is subtly tilted. So let's go ahead and get that straight. And then I'm just going to go ahead and pull in from each side and get rid of the white. And this is optional. You don't have to do this, but for me, it just helps bring the attention to the photo itself. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, hit return on my keyboard to go ahead and commit that crop. From here, as I mentioned earlier, AutoColor does amazing things with that color cast issue. So let's go ahead and click that. And that is tremendously better. Now from here, I can go down to my levels and I can make some fine-tuned tweaks. So I can go into those reds and I can adjust the endpoints, but in this case, I'm gonna go ahead and adjust here in the middle. You'll see if I drag it to the left, it gets more red. If I drag it to the right, it gets a little bit more green. So that green looks a little bit artificial, a little too blue. So then we can go over here to our greens and we can adjust that as well. So we go back to the left, it's getting a little more green. We go to the right, it's bringing back a little bit more of that magenta. And then we can go to our blues, and this is going to help warm this up and make that look more natural. So there we have it. And this is a really natural color correction to make to an image like this. And if you feel like the vibrance is still a little bit much, you can pull that back. And I think that looks pretty good. Let's take a look at the before and the after. I think this is an awesome example of some of the restoration that you can do to a photo in Mylio Photos while still being true to the image and keeping it authentic. And that's one thing when we're working with historical images, it's very tempting to kind of go overboard and try to make it look perfect by today's digital camera standards. I don't think that's actually what most of us should be doing. It's totally up to you. I'm not going to tell you how to deal with your images, but I like to keep that authenticity of sometimes the colors and the textures that are there that are inherent in the media that was used to capture that image. So that's just something to keep in mind as you go through and do your restorations. Let's do one more. And this is a picture of my grandma when she was very, very young. So again, we're going to do a quick crop on this. And I don't want to get rid of all of the white area, but I'm going to go ahead and pull it in because I do like these kind of edges right here, but I think there's a little bit more there than we need. So let's just pull that in a little bit tighter, right about there and there. And I think that looks really nice. And let's go ahead and do our auto color. You'll see that brings in some nice contrast, but I think it made it a little too dark. So we can then take our exposure, bring that up a little bit. And in doing so, some of these brightest areas start to lose that detail. So we can grab our highlights and pull that back. So we're keeping some of that depth, but retaining the detail here in her collar. And we can also add a little bit of clarity that gives this image a bit more the appearance of detail. That's what I was going for. Now from here, this image, it's really hard to say whether this was originally a black and white or originally more of a sepia toned image. So if I go here to black and white, I do like that, but this is where adding color comes in handy, is I can go ahead and bring back a little bit of that warmth. And then I think that looks tremendously better from where I started. So again, here's the before and there's the after. And I really like this transformation. I think it's really done good things for the picture. And again, it stays authentic and preserves it for future generations. So let me go ahead and take a look at our questions. I know we've had a few more come in here. Let's see here. So Lori says, will the TIFF be a separate file? So when you go ahead and you take a picture to an external editor and you create that TIFF file with your edits from Mylio, yes, it will be a separate file. How you save it will depend on whether it sits next to that raw file in Mylio or it stacks with the raw file in Mylio. And that's something we're going to go into next week. There is a chapter in the manual on that, on how to create a display image. And we're going to talk really in depth about that, but you have the option. Personally, most times I like to have it next to my raw file. And the reason for that is because I have a little bit of inside information here, which I'll share with you right now, is Actual stacking and be able to group things together the way you want to is coming to Mylio. It's a little ways down the road, but later on, we're going to be able to choose what we want to stack together. Right now, it's using those display images. Like I said, we'll talk more about those next week. But you have the option. So it's completely up to you. There's not a wrong answer. It's just what you prefer. So Janice says, what's the best way to re-import an image edited in an external program into Mylio and have it placed with the original? Excellent question. And the answer is super simple. Just save it back to the folder where the original resides and Mylio will see it. All right. Dawn says, when I edit a photo, I always get a pinwheel that takes some time for the photo to changes I asked for and sometimes causes Mylio crashes. What's the issue? That's very interesting, Dawn. When it comes to photo editing, if a program is taking a long time to spin and has issues, my first thought is that your computer might be a little bit underpowered. Without knowing the specs of your computer, it's hard to say. You might have the brand new computer and it's just maybe something is going wrong with Mylio. If it's something that you can replicate and it happens over and over, I would first recommend restarting your computer, restarting Mylio. If it continues to happen, reach out to Mylio support so they can take a look at it. Also, make sure you're running the most recent version of Mylio. So in case you're not sure how to do that, on Windows, that's going to be under the help menu and you'll have an option to check for updates. On Mac, that's under Mylio Photos right here, check for updates. If you need to get help from support, so if it's crashing and it's something that you can replicate, you go ahead to the help menu here and choose contact Mylio support right there. All right. John says, I've just started to work with some videos. What does auto enhance do for video? So it'll make the video look slightly different in Mylio, but it's only in Mylio. Mylio is not a video encoder. So if you want to make permanent changes to a video or be able to share those changes in a video outside of Mylio, you're going to want to do that in another application that can do that sort of rendering of video files. The editing of video files in Mylio is extremely limited. So it's mostly just for still photos. Penelope says, if you've edited a photo in Apple Photos before importing to Mylio, can you go back to the original image and start again? Penelope, it really depends on how you imported that photo from Apple Photos into Mylio. If you have your phone connected to Mylio and you just do the edit on your phone, then Mylio picks it up. You're going to have both that original file, which is typically going to be an HEIC or a JPEG, and then you're going to have actually that display image that Apple creates for you in that file. Let me show you what that looks like here really quick. So I'm going to go ahead and open this up. Let's go up here to my Apple Photos folder. And let me show this, show media in, and let me take a look here. So I think this one might be one I've edited. And I think some of these might have gotten picked up by Mylio before this one here. There we go. This is one that I edited on my phone before Mylio picked it up. So I have my original DNG because I typically shoot in RAW with my iPhone. Most people, if you haven't gone in and changed it, this is going to be an HEIC file. And then I have an MYB file, which is a Mylio bundle that groups together important information from Apple Photos that keeps all of that information together with this image. Then I have that JPEG, which is my edited version, and my XMP file. So if we take a look at that here in the Finder, go ahead and do that. You can see here's the underscore display. So it's got my file name underscore display. And then I have my original DNG, which is unprocessed. And there's the MYB file, which is a file that has information about the image along with my XMP metadata. So that's what happens when you edit in Apple Photos before it comes into Mylio. All right, let's see what else we've got here. Harold says, in your example of fixing the color on an old photo, if you have a series that is similar, how do you create a preset to use on the rest of the series? Excellent question. Let me show you how. I'm going to go ahead and go back here to my album. And let's go back here to this image. And I'm going to show you here really quick. I don't know if you've noticed, we have some new little icons here across the top. We have our Photo Explorer, which has been around for a while. We have one here to show it in the calendar. So if you want to quickly jump to the calendar, you can do that. And we have one here for show in folder. And that's going to take me to the folder where that image resides. And this one actually was edited in another program. Let me find the original here. All right. Perfect. So here we go. We've got pictures here of Grizzly. We've got one of my dad and a cat that he had. So these are all kind of similar and have similar toning issues. So let me go ahead and grab a few of these. And let's say we already figured out that we have edits on one of these. Well, let's do this one first. Let's go ahead and do an auto color on that. Maybe add a little bit more clarity. I think that looks pretty good. Let's just keep it really simple. So what you can do here is you can grab that image and then select other images and then copy. Actually, the better way to do this here. Let's grab that image, go here to edits, copy, then select the other images you want to apply those to, and then choose paste. And it's going to go ahead and paste those edits to all of the other selected images. That's one way to do it. The other way is if you want to go ahead and create a preset from that edit, you can go up here to your preset section and you can just click on the add button. You can go ahead and choose a name. So let's go ahead and call this 70s. And then you choose what adjustments you want to include. So in this case, I'm going to say I want to include all adjustments and I don't want to include the crop and I don't want to include the angle. So if I'd gone in and cropped one of these, I don't necessarily want that crop to go across to every single image, but you do have that option. So for this, I'm going to go ahead and say save. And so now I have one called 70s. Where did it go? There it is right there. And I can then go to other images and let's go ahead and grab this one here and 70s. And we can go ahead and apply that preset to that image. Again, there we go. There's that one. And it goes ahead and applies that. So that's how to do that. Now, if you create a preset that you don't want to keep anymore, you're done with it, you don't think you're ever going to use it again, or maybe you just don't like it anymore, you can hit that little gear and say delete. And that gets rid of the preset and cleans up that list. All right. What else have we got here? Can you make a virtual copy? Unfortunately, no, you can only make actual duplicate copies in Mylio Photos, Lori. That's a great question. And I hope that we have that option at some point in the future. I don't believe it's currently on our roadmap, but that is an awesome feature that I do miss from Lightroom. All right, Yolanda says, how can I remove yellow ghost eyes from photos? They're like red eyes, but yellow in color. That's a great question. So let's go ahead and take a look at this image here. One way you could do that is using the brush. You could go in and choose what you want to do here. So you can use any of these options. If it's to remove a yellow color, you might be best off using the white balance. So you go ahead and move that slider down, to a more blue area. And let's just say we want to make the cat a little bit, less yellow, or maybe let's make the trash can less yellow. So then we can go ahead and the radius is going to be the size of our brush down here at the bottom. And then we can go ahead and just brush that in and make that a little bit less yellow. Let's go ahead and see if that's actually making a difference here. Works on that. Does not seem like the white balance is affecting it like it should. To try that with a different image. You also have the option of using the saturation here, and you can see that that's definitely bringing down the yellow. You can go in there and brush that in a little bit more and make that selective change. So that might be your best option for yellow eyes. I haven't come across that personally, but I think this could work really well for you. Just back off the saturation of the vibrance and use the brush. All right, let me go ahead and reset that and go back over here to our chat, see what else we've got. Dawn says, what's your recommendation on which format the iPhone camera takes photos and how do you make that change? I often edit on the iPhone. Dawn, it depends on how much editing you want to be able to do on your photos. So for most people, using what the Apple default is perfectly fine. So you can still do edits on those images. You can do a lot with them, but I prefer to shoot in RAW. So I'm also a photographer by trade and I love photo editing and I want to have the maximum flexibility with my images. So that's why I shoot in RAW, which is that DNG format. You can go into your settings and into the camera settings on your phone and choose what format it goes with. Let me see real quick if I can pull that up on my phone and show you. 1 second here. I believe that is under camera. Right there. Formats. Okay, let me share my screen. All right, so if you go into your settings and then choose camera and formats, turn on right here, Pro Raw and Pro Default Pro Raw Max. So that's where you're gonna wanna be. And then also I keep the high efficiency on. So when I switch between different formats, it goes to the HEIC. And then when I'm shooting raw, it does allow me to capture the Pro Raw. So that's how you do that.
Angela, I don't have the Pro Raw option there. Is it because I don't have the latest iPhone?
That's probably why. Yep. You have to have the iPhone 13 Pro or newer.
And I do, so I guess, okay. And if I take a photo and then a couple days later, I take a photo on my iPhone and it uploads into Mylio, and then I edit it on the iPhone, does that edit then update Mylio?
Typically, no. But if you wanted to do that, you could use the share icon on your phone or on your from your camera roll. So do it like you're going to share to a text message and just share it to Mylio, and that'll share an edited version of that photo to Mylio. It might be side by side with your original, but you'll have both versions right there.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Let's see here. Lori says how to make a duplicate to edit. So what you can do is just right click on an image and say duplicate right there. That's how you do it. Great question. All right. Any other questions? Well, I'm looking forward to next week and talking about editing in third-party editors with you guys as well, and what a display image is and why you might need one. So that's a bigger topic, and I think it'll be a lot of fun. So those of you who like to edit, please make sure to join us next week. It's going to be a great one. Lori, can you ask a question after you wrap up? Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. All right. So I want to wish you guys a wonderful rest of your day. Have a great weekend. Hope you get a chance to go out and take some pictures, make some memories, and we'll see you next week. Bye, everyone.